Today on BenchBriefs, we're looking at a landmark case from the Supreme Court of Canada that shaped how the law approaches consent in sexual assault cases. It's called Pappajohn versus the Queen, decided in 1980, and it grapples with the tricky question: when can someone honestly believe there was consent, even if it turns out there wasn't? The story begins with a man named Pappajohn who was charged with rape after a sexual encounter with a woman. The woman later said she did not consent to the sexual activity, while Pappajohn insisted he believed she did. This disagreement over consent was the heart of the case. At trial, the judge told the jury they could consider whether Pappajohn honestly but mistakenly believed the woman consented. Despite this, the jury convicted him. So what exactly was at stake here? The case raised important questions about how courts should instruct juries on the defense of honest but mistaken belief in consent. Should the belief be reasonable, or is it enough that the accused genuinely held that belief, even if it was unreasonable? And what kind of evidence is needed to support such a defense? Finally, did the jury have enough information and proper guidance to make a fair decision? Let's break down the key legal issues. First, the Supreme Court had to decide if the trial judge gave proper instructions to the jury about the defense of honest but mistaken belief in consent. This is crucial because jury members rely on the judge to explain the law clearly, especially in complicated cases like sexual assault where consent is often disputed. Second, the court examined what evidentiary standard applies to this defense. Should the accused's belief in consent be judged by a subjective standard, what the accused actually believed, or an objective one, what a reasonable person would have believed under the circumstances? This matters because it influences how easy or hard it is for someone accused of rape to argue that they honestly thought the other person consented. Third, the court considered whether the jury was entitled to convict given the evidence and the instructions they received. In other words, did the jury have enough evidence to reject the defense and find guilt beyond a reasonable doubt? The Supreme Court ultimately held that the trial judge's instructions were inadequate. While an honest belief in consent is a valid defense, it must be based on reasonable grounds. It's not enough to simply say, "I thought she consented," if that belief was formed without any reasonable basis. The court emphasized that the accused must take reasonable steps to ascertain consent. This decision was significant because it balanced the protection of individuals from wrongful conviction with the need to uphold the importance of true consent in sexual relations. It made clear that the defense of honest but mistaken belief in consent is not a free pass. It must be grounded in reasonableness, reflecting both the accused's actual belief and the circumstances around the encounter. Why does Pappajohn versus the Queen still matter today? It helped establish a legal framework that courts continue to rely on when dealing with consent issues in sexual assault cases. It ensures that the law protects victims by requiring that consent be clear and that any claimed belief in consent must be reasonable. At the same time, it safeguards the rights of the accused by allowing for an honest belief defense, but only when that belief is properly supported. In short, Pappajohn reminds us that consent isn't just about what someone says after the fact. It's about what was understood and communicated at the time, and whether the accused took reasonable steps to ensure that consent was freely given. Thanks for listening to this episode of BenchBriefs. Join us next time as we dive into another important case that shapes Canadian law. Until then, take care.